Welcome. My name is Darren Keys, and I am the president of the Fort Worth Lawyers chapter of the Federalist Society. And on behalf of our chapter, I'd like to welcome you to Fort Worth and the 10th Annual Texas Chapters Conference. And this morning, I'm pleased to introduce our moderator for the Young Lawyers panel regarding careers in government service, Judge Brantley Starr. Judge Starr was appointed to the United States District Court for the Northern District of Texas in August 2019. Before his appointment, Judge Starr was the Deputy First Assistant Attorney General of Texas. And prior to that appointment, he served as Deputy Attorney General for Legal Counsel. From 2011 to 2015, Judge Starr served as a career staff attorney to Texas Supreme Court Justice Eva Guzman. From 2008 to 2011, he practiced at King and Spalding, and he served in the office of the Solicitor General from 2006 to 2008. Prior to that, Judge Starr clerked for then Justice Don Willett on the Texas Supreme Court after serving at the office of the Attorney General. Judge Starr received his law degree from the University of Texas School of Law and his Bachelor of Arts degree from Abilene Christian University in 2001. And Judge Starr has taught the origins of the Constitution class with Judge Eskridge at UT, Judges Kaczmarek and Pittman at Texas A&M, and will teach it at SMU with Judge Pittman. And on a personal note, I witnessed Judge Starr's calling to public and government service all the way back when we were students together at ACU and served in student government together. And I have witnessed his incredible professional trajectory over the last 25 years. And I can testify that his impressive resume has always been surpassed by his character, wisdom, kindness, and humility. Judge Starr.
Darren, thank you for the overly kind introduction. Darren and I had lots of fun in student government at ACU. We were experimenting with the limits of self-government and how far a people can go to govern themselves, and it worked out. We didn't destroy student government there, so we had lots of fun there. Okay, thank you for being here for our panel this morning. We do some things incredibly well at FedSoc, some other things you may question. Why we put a young lawyers panel at 8:30 when no young lawyer is awake would be a legitimate question to ask. I thought about bringing a defibrillator to wake people up in the hotel rooms upstairs, but we couldn't get the liability waiver form done in time. But thank you for being the choir who's here today to listen to what this fine panel has to offer. Speaking of our fine panelists, so these folks are awesome, and they're all dear friends of mine, so this is just going to be a fun discussion, and I can't wait to be a part of it. So we'll start with Justice Farris. She is a double justice. She was on the First Court of Appeals in Houston, and then Governor Abbott recently tapped her to be on the newly created 15th Court of Appeals that hears really the most interesting cases coming out of the trial courts in Texas. She clerked multiple times, including for Judge Elrod. And then I guess I should say that you and I also went to ACU, where Neil Coates has a couple of Pope Fellows back there. So Kaczmarek went to ACU as well. So we have lots of ACU folks on the bench. So can't wait to see y'all be judges and greet y'all at a future FedSoc when you're up here on a panel. Okay, so next we have Judge Barker. Judge Barker sits in Tyler. He also clerked multiple times, but he is not a dual justice. He's a dual threat because he had a tour of duty at the Solicitor General's office where he was Deputy Solicitor General for Texas and experience as a trial attorney for the Department of Justice. So he can speak to both state and federal government service today. So that makes him uniquely situated. And then last, but certainly not least, is Nick Ganjei, whose name got butchered yesterday at the indoctrination of our business courts. But I've always known him as Nick Ganjei, so everyone can practice that. Nick Ganjei. His name is easy to pronounce. Okay, so there are judges on this panel, and then there's the judge maker. Judge makers are more important than judges. Nick won't call himself a judge maker. His role is to be chief counsel to Senator Cruz as the Senate performs their constitutional duty of advising and consenting on judges. But having watched him in action, Nick is incredible. And so we just are really blessed to have a senator who will hire someone like Nick Ganjei. Nick started off in the Department of Justice a long time ago and worked his way up from a line level all the way up to being acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Texas. it is rare to find someone who's got that kind of resume and then who can make the jump that Nick did to have a senator say, I recognize your talent, I'm pulling you in-house. I just haven't seen anyone with Nick's resume. So he's a special addition to this panel so we can have a nice mix of state and federal experience. What I wanted to do is, instead of doing the full bio for each one of them, I wanted to do maybe an opening round where they can sort of talk through their story of government service and give you more of a flavor for what they did, and maybe for some of you young lawyers or lawyers who want to go into government service later, get a feel for what you might do too. So Double Justice Farris, can you lead us off and tell us about your government experience at OSG?
Sure. The double justice title is interesting. I just think of like the Hungarian double eagle or whatever. I don't even know what a double justice logo would look like.
Well, you're creating it. So
yes.
We'll figure it out.
Well, as the judge said, I'm on the 15th Court of Appeals in Texas, and I am really excited to talk to y'all later a bit about why our state judiciary is important and why I think it's a great idea, if you're interested in government service, to consider pursuing that career path. It was not on my radar when I went to law school. So I graduated from Harvard in 2009. I had summered for Yetter Coleman, which at the time was a national litigation boutique, and it was headed up by Greg Coleman, who had been Texas's first Solicitor General. He was brilliant. He had a huge U.S. Supreme Court docket. It was like the dream of a lifetime. Loved working there, and got an offer after I summered there, and then I clerked for Judge Elrod after graduation. And then I went back to Yetter Coleman and was working on some great cases for Greg when tragedy struck, and he was killed in a plane crash about 2 weeks after I'd started work. And for a while, things looked really uncertain. We didn't know what was going to happen to the office, but they ended up bringing in some great talent, like Cam Barker. So when the judge says I had multiple clerkships, I only clerked for one judge, but I practically clerked for Cam Barker because he was in the office and you could already tell he was going places. And he got me, helped me to work up my very first oral argument case, which was a CJA appointment in the Sixth Circuit. And he had some friends at the Texas SG's office. And so I went and mooted my first case in front of, I believe, multiple people who are on the federal bench now. Judge Barker was there. I think Judge Oldham was there. Judge Farris was there. So I had a really impressive, and none of these people were judges at the time, but I had quite the bench. So after that, I went to the SG's office to get a few oral arguments under my belt. And then after that, I eventually returned to Yetter Coleman, became a partner there, but I always knew that I wanted to go into government service and be a judge at some point. And absolutely was floored when the opportunity came up. It was when I was partner and I was really loving litigation. I was having the best time. I'd won some big cases, and I really wasn't ready to leave the firm. I loved my firm. But I'd had a mentor of mine, actually, who'd been a Democrat, was in his 70s, and he told me that one of his biggest life regrets was not taking a judicial appointment when he was offered one, because then the governor's mansion switched parties, and that opportunity never came up for him again. And so when I got the opportunity, I put in my application, and it wasn't really a great time for our family, but I got the call and joined the first Court of Appeals, and the rest has been history.
That's great. Okay, Judge Barker, what can you tell us about your bio?
Okay, well, so I grew up in New Orleans and Houston. You want to start all the way back then? After graduating from Texas A&M, I thought I'd be a computer engineer. The dot-com bubble burst, pivoted, went to law school, clerked for then Chief Judge Walker on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals and Judge Bryson on the Federal Circuit, intending to do some sort of patent litigation or IP litigation. But Judge Bryson was a big proponent. Judge Walker was as well, but Judge Bryson, as the judge I was clerking for when I needed to make that decision, was a big proponent of considering government service. And he really steered me towards considering opportunities at the Justice Department. So I did apply to the criminal division in the appellate section. Having done a full 2 years of appellate litigation, I thought I knew everything about appellate litigation, and I wanted to keep going. primarily to get experience a lot sooner than I thought I would get it if I went to a law firm. That was my thought process, and that turned out to be the case. So I served in the appellate section at DOJ in Washington, D.C. for about 4 years, including a detail to a prosecutor's office. I think, as you said, my title there was nominally trial attorney, but my day-to-day was entirely appellate. But that was the way we labeled things at the Justice Department. After about 4 years of that, decided it was time to get back to Texas and join Yitter Coleman with Judge Farris. Now Judge Farris was there, a number of great colleagues there, and worked there for about 3 years until I joined the Texas Solicitor General's office in 2015, and worked there for about 4.25 years until taking this job, which has been the longest I've been able to hold down a job. So my wife's really happy with me.
We started on the same day at the Texas AG's office, and we're getting our badges at the same time, and we're conjoined in litigation ever since. Okay, Nick, tell us about your background.
So, Senator Ted Cruz, if you're watching this, I never called myself a judge maker. I never would call myself a judge maker. Please do not fire me. Thank you for that introduction. When I graduated law school, like many great Texas conservatives, I came from California. I graduated law school, went on to clerk on the district court level in the District of North Dakota for then District Court Judge Ralph Erickson, now Circuit Judge Ralph Erickson, and then went on to the Sixth Circuit in Michigan to clerk for Judge Richard Allen Griffin. Both were great judges and encouraged, pursuing a career in public service, if not, at least a stint in public service. So following that clerkship, I assumed I would go into the private sector, like, all my fellow clerks, and had offers from law firms, but I also, on a whim, sent an application to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of New Mexico, a place I had, never been, never lived, but I always found it interesting and, it shared a border with Mexico. I understood there was a lot of criminal cases there, and, I wanted to do, criminal cases, or at least get my feet in a courtroom. And to my surprise, I got the I got the job offer, which I didn't think would happen. It was they only had about a 7-day application window, and so I assumed they had someone in mind already, and were going through the paces. But I got the job, moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico, just a little bit west of El Paso, and prosecuted border cases for a while, and then got pulled up to Albuquerque to work organizational drug cases, wiretap cases, organized crime cases. Eventually moved over to white collar and appeals, and got an unusual offer to spend some time in Washington, D.C., working for the Office of Legal Policy, which is sort of the idea shop for DOJ. And I did some policy work, but mainly judicial nominations, which was for President Trump, which was an extremely rewarding experience. And it was difficult, admittedly, to go back to New Mexico after my time detailed there expired, and so I was kind of looking for another way to serve. Around that time, Steve Cox was appointed the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Texas. Phenomenal lawyer, he's a mentor and a friend, and he asked me if I would be his first assistant. I agreed. Moved to Beaumont, Texas, again a place I had never been and never lived, and once again, really found that I enjoyed the place. And, I actually met Judge Barker there. He was a judge in Tyler, the Eastern District. But when Steve Cox stepped down, U.S. Attorney Cox, I stepped in as the acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District. And from there, there was, I think we'll get to it later, but there was a time where I felt it was time to go, and became Chief Counsel for Senator Cruz. So rounding out the third branch of government I've worked in, definitely different, but very rewarding. And I get to do the most interesting stuff of my career each and every day. So I'm truly blessed.
Okay, well, that's a great fleshing out of what your job was. I'm wondering if we can jump back to Judge Barker and Justice Farris and unpack a little bit what Judge Barker, your misnamed trial attorney job, really working in the appellate section, was like day to day. So what did it look like? And then Justice Farris, I'm wondering what OSG looked like, if you can flesh that out. So what does an average, perhaps week, look like when you were doing the criminal appellate work at DOJ, Judge Barker?
Sure. So the Justice Department has 6 primary components and then a number of specialized components: criminal division, civil, environmental, tax, antitrust, and I must be forgetting one. Did I say civil rights already? I don't think. In any event, each of those components then has a number of sections that specializes in some area. So criminal would have perhaps dangerous drugs, fraud, cybercrime, and then appellate was one of those sections. So our work was supporting, from an appellate perspective, the work of all of the other components of the criminal division, as well as the work of the U.S. Attorney's offices, which are not within the criminal division, but of course are the front line of our criminal work for the Justice Department. So on any given day, we had three main responsibilities. One was providing advice to the different AUSAs or U.S. attorneys in different U.S. attorneys' offices across the country. Each one of us was designated as the liaison to a certain number of districts. I had the Western District of Texas and the two Mississippi districts of all the districts. So you got to know their staff and develop a rapport and some trust so that you could understand how things work there. And that was a lot of just informal advice, guidance, that sort of thing. The second responsibility was drafting appellate briefs, and not just drafting them, but preparing and filing appellate briefs and then arguing cases that were referred to the appellate section by different U.S. attorneys' offices. Our model was that we took referrals, but we did not exercise a right to pluck cases out of the U.S. attorneys' offices, but other divisions had a different model. For instance, if you join the civil appellate section, with the section chief's approval, you can affirmatively take appeals out of the U.S. Attorney's Office. But when we referred cases, often complex cases, maybe just needed a little more sustained attention than the line attorney might be able to provide, we'd brief those, go and argue those, and argue them in U.S. Courts of Appeals around the country. That was one of the big draws for me in joining that section, was the chance to do that. And then the final responsibility was working with the Solicitor General's office on everything that they did in criminal cases. So that took two forms. One was preparing drafts of U.S. Supreme Court briefs and then supporting the various attorneys in the Solicitor General's office in terms of advising on the record, doing moot courts, and going to the Supreme Court, and often third chairing or fourth chairing the Supreme Court arguments. And then the other support we provided to them was providing recommendations on whether the Solicitor General should approve an appeal or withhold permission to appeal when some DOJ component lost an issue. And we'd prepare a memo to the Solicitor General. It was followed on by several other attorneys smarter than me providing memos, and then ultimately the Solicitor General would make that decision. So just to recap, it was a really great way to learn the procedural workings of the Justice Department, to get to know the U.S. Attorney's offices across the country, the different ways they may do things, and especially primarily doing appeals, to learn the federal rules of appellate procedure really well. So I got a lot from that experience.
Okay, so I admire the office's restraint in not necessarily plucking cases from component divisions. Mm-hmm. That is a restraint that OSG has never known. Justice Farris, can you tell us about the practice at OSG and what an average week was like?
That is a totally foreign way of doing things in comparison with OSG. I loved my experience at OSG because you really got to take a case and make it your own. You could do the full workup, you could argue the appeal because of kind of the unique structure of the Texas OSG office. And I believe Greg Coleman actually set it up that way when he was the first SG under then Attorney General Abbott. But every division had to fill out a memo when one of their cases was getting ready to go up on appeal, when the notice of appeal was filed. And that memo would come to our office, and the memos would come in every day, and everybody got a chance to look at the memos, and it was kind of first come, first serve. And so if you saw a case memo that looked interesting to you, you grabbed that case, and the division might complain, and the division often did complain, but there was nothing they could do about it because it was your case, and you got to work it up. You did all the briefing. You got to handle the oral argument if the case went to oral argument. But the thing I loved about the SG's office at the time was that every case had two moots, regardless of whether it was just a little small appeal or a huge appeal that was going to the Fifth Circuit. You would get two moots. Your colleagues would be tougher than the ultimate panel would be, at least in my experience. But you just learned an incredible amount about how to be a good oral advocate. And also, they would redline your briefs to death, which was also very helpful. But so I ended up getting to argue a few cases in the Texas courts, and I got to argue one in the Fifth Circuit. But then the other component of that job was working on big team cases. And so when I was at OSG, I got to work for Cam again the second time. I'd worked for him at Yetter Coleman, and then he was the deputy when I was an assistant SG, and I got to work on some really big cases that were bound for the U.S. Supreme Court. Ultimately, they were in the Fifth Circuit when I was there, but we worked on like the big DAPA case together, and I think some others. But those cases were ones where obviously the assistant was not handling everything top to bottom, but you were working with a big team and learning a lot from your colleagues and kind of doing a big group project on some of these massive pieces of litigation. So.
That was what was fascinating to me about OSG is it was a beautiful mix of having your own cases, but with other people sharpening your work, and then working on high-profile cases where you're one of several lawyers, but the cases are all over the news. And so it's just a beautiful mix of both. Any one of those could get boring over time or tiring, but when you mix them together, it's just endless fun. Okay, so I want to spend the rest of our time perhaps talking about three things. One, why would you go work for government? Y'all have hinted at that. I just want to tease it out and make it express. Two, how do you do it mechanically? Like, how do you actually find these jobs? And three, when do you find them? Because we've got folks who are everywhere from ACU undergrads to folks who have been practicing for a while. And so I want to give them as much advice as we can. So let's start off with the why to make it relevant. So this is popcorn. Anyone can jump in. But if you have a devil's advocate telling you you are going to get paid far less than in the private sector, you may work even more than in the private sector. Why on earth would you go work for the government? Anyone want to, and we can do this in popcorn fashion. Y'all can just throw out things and we can unpack them later.
Is that true? Do people in the private sector get paid more than the
You wouldn't know?
I'm really upset to hear this.
I'm sorry that we're just now breaking this to you. So the founders would call it getting restored to private ease, which is why they never imposed term limits. They were like, what morons like you and me would want to just stay on government payroll forever.
Well, if you don't mind, for me, the why was something that was self-evident to me from the time I graduated law school. You get to do the most interesting things in the public sector, and a lot of which are sort of the monopoly of either the federal government or the state government. Like, where else are you going to be able to cross-examine, a criminal defendant in open court in front of a jury, or go into a grand jury, or deal with some of the most pressing political issues of the day? To me, that itself, if that is something I did not do for a living, it is something I would pay to do. It's been incredible. It's been an incredible experience. And so there's also the aspect of that you deeply care about your country, your state, your community, and what you are doing day to day, directly benefits those people. And it can be thankless at times, but you understand at the end of the day that you're making their lives, a little bit better. And third, the public spiritedness, you get to work with some amazing people. You'll find that in a lot of AUSA's offices, there's a disproportionately high number of military reservists, right? The people that see a way to serve the public in one way usually see it in many ways. People may go into elective office. They may go to the federal government from state government. They may rotate in and out of different government agencies. These are people that want to find a way to serve their fellow citizens. So for me, again, it was pretty easy decision for me. I think the hard decision in government is knowing when to leave. A lesson I have not apparently learned. But I think it's a tremendous and easy question as to the why.
So I would echo all of that. But another great reason to do it is for career advancement if you're in a law firm. I mean, even if you don't envision having a, extended career in public service, you get real benefits from going and doing government service, even, for just a few years. I was at a conference recently and somebody said, the best way to make partner at a law firm is to leave the law firm. And that's really true. The people who go and do a stint in government get extremely valuable experience that you just can't get anywhere else. Because quite honestly, if you want to be an appellate partner at a firm, good luck getting, your huge, billion-dollar corporation to pay for little old you to, argue your first appeal. It's probably not going to happen. I mean, it might, but it's once you've actually proven your skills, like in a government context, then the law firms are really excited to have you argue their case. And so it's a great option, even if you don't think you want to do that forever. But if you do have an interest in, becoming a judge or something like that, then I think, considering running for a state court bench is a great way to go, because actually I've got a quote here. I don't think it actually made the Hamilton musical, but Hamilton called the state courts the immediate and visible guardians of life and property. And it's so true. Our state courts handle everything. I mean, they handle your big contract cases, but they handle important things like parental terminations. They handle, the criminal issues, everything that really makes a difference in people's day-to-day lives, those state courts are handling. And so we desperately need people who have a heart for their state, who have a heart for their, fellow citizens to come run for office and serve on your state courts.
Hamilton's framing of guardians for state judges is much loftier than the Constitution's framing of inferior for you and me,
Yes.
Cam. So that's I like that better. Okay, Cam, what do you want to add on why you should go serve in government?
On the why, well, first of all, I'd echo everything that the other panelists had said. I think it's really important that we get good people, quality people into government, that competent people who care about accuracy, learning the craft, and serving our country. My thinking at the time when I first made that decision, and then when I went back, definitely involved some aspects of that, as well as just aspects of personal service. And I did turn down the big signing bonus and join DOJ. It can be done. I was encouraged a lot by seeing judges that I respected making the similar choice in their careers. Judge Bryson did something similar, and I think encouraged me to consider taking the time early in my career to be in an environment where I could learn the craft of lawyering without some of the pressures that come with being in a environment where you're running a business. And I really enjoyed my time at Yetter Coleman and in private practice as well. And I'm not here in any way to tear down the model of practicing law at a law firm for a business. But for me, being able to spend my first few years learning from a lot of career attorneys, learning from people in the Solicitor General's office without the pressures of everything that comes with billing clients, I think helped me grow a lot in my first few years. So that was a big part of it for me. Just as for instance, the microwave room in the criminal appellate section where I'd go microwave my lunch almost every day was right across the hall from the section's repository of appeal memos that had been written to the Solicitor General on whether an appeal should be taken in a certain case. And those memos went back decades. So I would often put my food in the microwave and go across the hall while it was microwave and pull down a binder and just open it up and read something from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and see, famous names there, see their thinking on cases that had arisen over time. That might not be something that I felt I had the luxury to do if I was at a firm and was trying to hit a certain number of billable hour components. But I learned a lot about writing, about how to think about cases, how different areas of federal criminal law fit together from that and experiences like that. So those are some opportunities that might present themselves if you don't feel the pressures of necessarily, again, achieving a certain number of billable hours.
Let me hit one more subtopic on why. And one thing I hear all the time from lawyers is that the cost of law school has gotten so high, and student loans are now correspondingly high, that they can't afford to go work for government. But can y'all talk from your perspective about golden handcuffs for a little bit? And because this is something I struggle with too, because I was at a firm for 3 years, but ultimately we fought hard to not get golden handcuffs. Do you have any experience, Judge Barker, Justice Farris, that you can offer on trying to structure your life so you can answer a call to go to government in the future from a financial standpoint?
Well, I do think that's important.
Microwave lunches help.
Microwave lunches, yeah. Get really handy with home repairs, auto repairs,
Yes.
things like that. I learned to do from my father and have come in very handy for me over the years, installing flooring, etc. Nothing other than to say, just be aware of that and make choices. I went straight from government service, straight as clerking, right into DOJ. So I never really had that pressure, and just always made it a point to live within our means.
Yeah.
But I do think that's important.
Yeah, understood. Justice Farris, anything you want to add to the golden handcuffs analysis?
Sure. It's real. The pressure is real. Like when, I took my 65% pay cut to join the bench. You feel it. You really do. And so I think probably the best things you can do are getting used to living frugally. You don't have to go to excesses on that when you're at the law firm, but you need to be cognizant of what you need to live on. And so we paid my law school loans off really early. Fortunately, I got married when I was still in law school, and my husband was able to work while I was in law school, so we didn't have to take out too many loans. But by time I was out and I'd finished my clerkship, we made a conscious effort to pay those back as quickly as we possibly could. And then, when we bought a house, we tried to get one that was modest for, a law firm salary and everything. But when we started looking towards potentially applying for a vacancy spot to be a judge, we decided, okay, well, we probably need to move to the suburbs. It's time. And we were really blessed because even before we were really quite sure where we wanted to go or what we wanted to do, I was friends with a realtor, and she started basically trying to sell my house before we'd even decided we were ready to move. But it was at a great time. Interest rates were fantastic. We moved out to the suburbs. We made some real conscious decisions about how to live more frugally, and we were able to do it. But we couldn't have done that if we hadn't started planning years in advance to have that flexibility.
Okay, so let me add one thing to the discussion on student loans. You can't count on a future president forgiving your loans because Mark Pittman will enjoin that. But just bear with me for a second, because I think taking the pay cut, I only took a 50% pay cut to go to a firm, to government. Yours was bigger than mine. But we ran the math on how much we would need to save for retirement at the firm to compensate for the state pension program. And it was almost 50%. We hadn't been saving 50% of my big firm paycheck. But the point is, go look at the retirement systems on the state and federal level, because they are almost forced savings account. Even though I only had 11 years there, I'll still get an annuity kicking in at about 15 years that pays me because I spent 11 years there. And it's not an insignificant sum of money. And so don't just think, oh, I'm taking a 50% pay cut or 65, I can't do it. Think, how much would I have to save of my current paycheck that I'm not saving in order to retire at the level that I want to? Okay, so we talked about why to go to the government. I want to talk for a few minutes about how. And I guess, can we start with you, Judge Barker? I'm wondering how, because on our prep call, you were explaining you've got to look at what job you want to go to. Some jobs are line jobs, some jobs are political appointments, and it's different to get into each. So can you break that down for us and give us your advice?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the first. Clerkships are their own thing, but when I joined DOJ, I found that job when I was clerking just by monitoring, I think it was the USA Jobs website, where all jobs working for the federal government are posted. The DOJ does have an honors program that if you're coming out of law school or a clerkship, you can apply to that. I think the way that worked was you rank your top 3 preferences, and then if you're hired, you get put into one of those sections as the need exists. I did not use the honors program. I just applied through the posting for USA Jobs. So just be aware, for those of you who might be in a similar position now or down the road, that you can join the DOJ right after clerking without necessarily going through the honors program, contingent upon the government not being shut down and there being funding and everything. And I think that posting required 2 or 3 years of experience, but my clerkship years counted, and it turned out to be a good fit. So that's one way to do it. A lot of U.S. attorneys' offices have postings on their own websites. I think it would be possible with some sort of Google alert to set up, if you're thinking about doing that, to set up some sort of Google alert where you get an email summary every week or something of any new jobs that come up. So I would encourage you to be creative and don't just rely on one source to explore potential government opportunities. And really, as far as political appointments go, to each specific job is its own creature, and I think the only thing you can do that's within your control to affect that is to try to do the best work that you can from an early age onwards and be consistent in doing that. I'm not aware of anything more that a given person can do other than try to be the best attorney you can, because I think your reputation develops over time. I've heard later through the grapevine that a law school outline that I prepared for one of my Fed courts class and put on the law review database apparently, preceded me in terms of reputation. So nice. Yeah, I didn't know that at the time. I was just trying to do the best I could, but that's one vignette about how your reputation does develop over time. So that's about all I can give specifically on the political appointments.
Sure. So he mentioned government shutdown. So I think under Senate rules, you have a right to respond. But regardless of shutdowns, you went for a line attorney job. You had a political appointment job at DOJ, and then you've also had a political appointment job in the Senate. So what advice can you give us on where to find the jobs, whether they be line or appointment?
Sure. So I wanted to echo Judge Barker's comment that you don't know when these opportunities are going to arise. And when they do arise, you often have to move very quickly. So having the flexibility to do so, whether that be financial or your own personal situation, is very important. But in terms of qualifying for these jobs, you need to have a reputation as a skilled lawyer. And in the political jobs that you would carry out the duties of that job in alignment with your principal. So if you have a reputation as an excellent lawyer who's aligned with whoever the principal might be, you may get a phone call. It may be from the person currently in the position that's looking to go. It may be from like a chief of staff. It may just be from a friend that's like, hey, I heard about an opening on so-and-so staff that I think you'd be great for based on your interest in XYZ issue, and that particular person is really dialed into XYZ. And so, maintaining great friendships, and I don't mean that in a transactional way, I mean genuine friendships and, collegial relationships pays dividends. And again, not in a transactional way, but they will let you know when something right is available. And, you can apply, you cannot apply. And, you should do the same. If you know of a great opportunity for somebody, that maybe isn't aware of it, then let them know. Maybe a judge is looking for a clerk on a short-term basis. Maybe a senator had a staff member that left on family leave and needs somebody to join their team. Help one another out, help each other find these great opportunities that, we don't always hear because our eyes and ears aren't everywhere.
Appreciate the insight. I remember initially Thomas Jefferson told John Adams, well, now's not the right time for me to write the Declaration of Independence because I haven't been home in months. And I'm so glad he changed his mind. Now is always the time to declare independence. Okay, Justice Farris, can you add some flavor to us, perhaps in terms of OSG and that perspective on how to apply? Because OSG, so we've separated out political appointments and line jobs. And I almost want to peg OSG as a hybrid. Right, like it's not a line job, but like there's a normal application process. It's not just a psst, hey. But then if you don't know someone on the inside and have credibility coming into the process, then you may not get it. So it has aspects of line jobs for the application and aspects of political appointment. What can you tell us about getting into OSG?
Well, I don't know that I can speak to it very broadly because I had a couple of unique circumstances. I'd worked for Greg Coleman, who was the first Texas SG.
That helps.
And then I'd mooted my very first appeal in front of the SG's office when I was still at Yetter Coleman. And so everybody there was familiar with my work. So, but what I would say more broadly is, you network and you treat people well, like Nick said, because you never know, when you're going to switch jobs, who you're going to meet, who's going to end up being in the position to make appointments someday. And so long as you're doing good work and you're treating people well, genuinely, not treating people as stepping stones, but you're actually being a friendly, nice person, you're going to get calls. And, when you're in an environment like this, make friends, take people out to coffee. And also don't forget to extend that when you're on your way up to people who are coming up behind you. I would strongly encourage all of you, if you don't have mentees, get them, take them to coffee, connect them to your networks, because this is, it's important for all of us. You never know, who's going to need that connection later down the line.
It's not a career advice panel, but we're giving it to you anyways because it's useful. Okay, so the last big topic for us to cover is when. When should you go? And I don't feel like it's fair for us to just launch into that before explaining a little more about DOJ Honors Program for perhaps you, and more about Coleman Fellows from either of our SG alums. So can you start with explaining what DOJ Honors Program is and the timing of it all?
Sure. So DOJ Honors is a program the Department of Justice has to bring in exceptional candidates earlier in their career than they may otherwise be looked at. And I think it's a 3-year window from graduation. And so you come into certain components of criminal division, I think antitrust division. There's sometimes a couple of AUSA office or U.S. attorney's offices that will hire out of that. And you come in as a more junior attorney, but typically they're extremely well qualified. And you'll meet people that have impressive positions today, and they're like, yes, I began as a DOJ honors attorney. It's helpful because it's a very centralized way to apply to DOJ, as opposed to, say, U.S. attorney's offices, which are on completely different schedules, and you can't apply to a central thing. It's when District of X or District of Y is hiring. But it's a great badge for your future career that you're a DOJ honors, because you typically get a lot of responsibility very, very quickly in your career.
One thing I want to clarify and highlight is Nick's mention of there are some offices that will hire out of the honors program. So it's a limited term duration, but if you do good work and they have an opening that you fit the metrics for, then you've done the best job interview ever. And so I've seen a number of honors program participants get hired into permanent positions in different offices and perform quite well. So it's not a guarantee, but you're not out of consideration just because you're doing honors program. Okay, so can we talk about Coleman Fellowship? Do you want to talk about it, Judge?
Sure. The Coleman Fellowship is, I think it was renamed during my time there. It existed before that under a different name, but it was
Pre's idea. So Pre came to my office one day and said, "We haven't named the fellowship. Why not name it for Greg Coleman?" And I sat there and thought, duh. I was in the first year of when Senator Cruz created the fellowship. It was just unnamed. And so at one point he told me, if it's an unnamed fellowship, it's a dudeship. You're a dude. Sorry, we can't give you a name. So Pre figured out a way to give it a name later on that is an incredibly high honor for Greg Coleman and what he meant to this organization. So now it's properly named Coleman Fellowship. But what does it look like, Judge Barker?
Sure. It's an opportunity for attorneys earlier in their career to come in for, I believe it's still a 1-year term, correct? 1-year term, and assist the Solicitor General's office with their day-to-day work, in many ways stepping into the shoes of a line assistant to the Attorney General. There are some potential restrictions, as not every Coleman Fellow is admitted to the bar, and so there might be some restrictions on the ability to practice. But once you get admitted, you're entrusted with the same responsibilities of preparing appeal memos, working with the divisions to support them on legal issues. And the goal of the office, at least during my time there, was always that each Coleman Fellow would have the opportunity to take ownership of, brief, and argue in some court of appeals at least one case during their time there, and ideally more than one. So it's a great way to get early opportunity working with attorneys who are practicing nominally at the top of their game pretty early in your career, and was modeled in that regard after the Bristow Fellowship in the Office of the United States Solicitor General, which offers a similar opportunity.
And one thing I'll add on the Coleman Fellow front is there's also a one-year fellowship in the Special Litigation Division at the AG's office, and so that's the division that handles a lot of the trial, high-profile litigation. So I don't think they've named it, but one of these decades they'll name it, and it'll be cool, like the Coleman Fellowship. But for now, the work is incredible. It's awesome. It's just not as long in duration as the Coleman Fellowship is. And same caveat for Coleman Fellows and for Special Lit Fellows is that if you do good work and there's an opening somewhere in the agency, then you've got a leg up on all the outside applicants. So there's no reason not to think about it if you can afford to work for the government and not pay down student loans. Okay, so let me ask, now that we've sort of set what the out of law school opportunities are, let me ask, is it too late to go to government? Let's say someone's been out 5 years, 10 years. Is it too late to go work for DOJ or too late to go work for the AG's office or a district attorney's office? When do you think is too late? Anyone have any thoughts on the matter?
Well, I guess in general on the timing question, what I've told some of even my own former clerks is you need to make sure that the specific job you're applying for is right for you. I mean, the jobs are public service jobs and you're there to serve your country, but if it's not a good fit for you, you won't be there long, and it won't, you won't achieve your whatever goal you have of serving your state or your country. And there are many different types of government jobs. So if you're interested in a position and you happen to have a friend of a friend or a law school classmate who might be there, ask if you can take them out for coffee and learn about what it is they do day to day. The job, for me, I was particularly intrigued when I joined criminal appellate, for instance, by the opportunity of being able to spend a little bit more time and turning out bespoke briefs and digging in a little more deeply to legal issues. Just be aware that not all government appellate jobs are that way. Some jobs are going to present you a lot more opportunity to be in court arguing, but on the flip side of that coin might be you don't necessarily have as much time to dig into as deeply into issues in a given case. So you kind of need to start to develop some self-awareness about what excites you about the practice of law. Is it standing up in court? Is it the life of the mind? Is it winning cases? Is it cross-examining witnesses? And the more you can kind of reflect on what you might want to be pursuing at any given point, the more you can hopefully try to target the right kind of government job. And those opportunities, as you said, Nick, and as you said, Justice Farris, may come up at very different times in your career. So to me, the question of when is also very related to the question of what and how.
That's fair. Anything to add on when, Justice Farris?
I think it's never too late. If you find something that you're interested in or passionate about, if you can afford it financially, go do it. Because I've talked to people who've really regretted not taking the opportunity when it came. And I think, if you're in the law firm, sort of the sweet spot for doing that sort of thing is probably around the 4th or 5th year. But I've seen people go in as partners, and people, have great experiences, and then they come back and come to a different firm. And really, there are so many options. So don't ever feel like you've somehow missed the boat.
I appreciate the perspective both on 4 to 5 years is average and it's never too late. So when I was back at the AG's office with Judge Barker, two of the lawyers I learned the most from in trials were Tom Albright and Darren McCarty. Had left being managing partners for sizable firms to come to the AG's office. So I remember when Darren joined, he unpacked his stuff in his office, and I said, there's a trial next week in San Antonio over whether Texas can ban sanctuary cities. Want to go? And he's like, yeah, I want to go. And so we just went and tried a case on a week's prep. And it was phenomenal because Darren is just a top flight lawyer. Tom Albright taught me more tricks on trials than anyone I've learned from. And they had incredible careers, managing partners at big firms, and decided they wanted to invest in their government and help Texas. And it wasn't just on the cases they had. They would rotate and work with different lawyers over time. And you could tell they just pulled up the talent level of everyone else around them. And they've been lawyers for 20, 25 years. So definitely broke the mold of 4 to 5 years. Okay, Nick, what do you want to add on when is the time to go? Every time? First year, 20th year, all points in between?
If that's what your heart wants, then that's what you should do. I echo Justice Farris that it's never too late to consider public service. If you're looking for it as a way, obviously, to maybe move ahead in the private sector as sort of an end around, then obviously it would behoove you to do it a little bit earlier in your career so you can receive the benefits of that. But yes, no, I've seen people come in, maybe that you've had a change in your life. Maybe you now have children, you want a more manageable schedule. I don't mean an easier schedule, but maybe one you have more control over the hours of your day. You won't get a partner phone call at like 9:30 saying, hey, I need you to jump on this and have something, by tomorrow morning. So maybe, there's a shift in your circumstances that make you seek a position in government. There's no right or wrong answer to it. It's just whether, again, you can afford it, whether you have the flexibility to do it, whether your spouse or partner, you can also, handle the decrease in pay or the different responsibilities that the job might entail.
Okay, so we may have time for one or two questions. What I will say while y'all are thinking of your questions is Ben Franklin told us that the framers gave us a republic if we can keep it. I think working for government is not the only way to keep the republic, but it is one of the most rewarding ways to keep the republic. So we have a couple of minutes. If everyone's got questions, we've got hot mics on either side of the room, and you can always approach us after this panel if you have a targeted question for one person. Questions about careers in government? Anybody? Bueller? Okay, well, let's give a thanks to our panel for being the early birds forging into the breach.